Today we want to talk about the idea that roads in Kenya are altars to the occult. In ancient times, there were very many occultic religions that involved human sacrifices, and you may have heard of it or not. Now, such cults have existed and continue to exist until modern times. Now, after the British left, the people that they left in charge, the sellouts that took over the country, were part and parcel of the British elite. They were absorbed into the British elite. And the British elite is very occultic. In fact, their ruling house is a very well-known founding member of the oldest occult society. Now, as independence was granted, many of the people that inherited power in Kenya and also other African countries were also absorbed and recruited into these occultic institutions. Now, these cults have a fundamental belief that is very different from what you may know or what you may have heard of before. They run contrary to the religions that are common in all other places in the world. And one of the reasons why they are cults and one of the reasons why they are rejected is their insistence upon human sacrifice. When you study very many ancient empires, you'll discover that the top people always sacrificed many people from their countries or from conquered territories to whatever gods they worshipped. I do not want to go too deep into the issue of the occult. I don't want to describe it too much because that's not the purpose of this video. But there are some things that I need to highlight so that you can see the connections between these cultic practices, the modern world. The entities that they worship in the occult are the very same entities that ancient peoples also worshipped. And without getting too deeply into it, these entities thrive off human trauma. The currency of the occult is not money, it's human blood. Don't even want to know why this is the situation, just accept that this is the situation. That when you're traumatized, the entities are able to absorb that energy of trauma. So the people who worship this entity have to traumatize people as a way of appeasing or pleasing these entities, which in exchange give them knowledge and power. And so a lot of the powerful people have done what is called selling your soul. In other words, they make a deal with these entities that in exchange for human blood and human trauma, they gain power. That's usually the trade-off. Now, once the occult takes over the politicians of a country, then you're in serious trouble, because when you study the occult origins of the first major European war in 1914 through 1918, you'll discover that was simply an occultic arrangement between the different ruling families. And the idea was, without getting too deeply into it, was you need to sacrifice X number of people in exchange for a certain outcome. And so they sacrificed the X number of people, which ran into millions. And the Second World War, fought between 1939 and 1945, was also an occultic arrangement. Sacrifice X number of people for a certain outcome. Now, this would only make sense if you know and understand the story of John Dee and Edward Kelly. Then it would fully make sense. If you don't understand that story, then a lot of it may not make sense. But at any rate, that is the situation. Sacrifice X number of people in exchange for this. So that is what is happening in Kenya, because more and more of our elite belong to the occult. They worship these entities. They don't worship the God that you imagine they worship. No, they worship these alternative entities in exchange for money and power and worldly success. Many people in Kenya are willing to sell their soul. In fact, I think the devil has more applications from Kenyans than he would know what to do with, because when you think of the corruption in government, and not only at the highest levels, even at the lowest levels, isn't that selling your soul? You know, when you're just a basic working in government and you're willing to do anything, including kill anyone, just for a little bit of money. It's the same thing, isn't it? Sacrifice people in exchange for money and power. So what has happened is that, because now in ancient times, the occult those were the official religions in very many empires. This was not a hidden thing. For example, in Mesoamerica, they would sacrifice hundreds of people on altars on those pyramids that they built, right? It was open. That was the religion. But now, because that kind of behavior is unacceptable, in most parts of the world, you can't go around killing and sacrificing people openly. So what has happened? It has become, those religions have become the occult. They have become hidden. Occult simply means that they're hidden, okay? But the religions are still there. So how do they sacrifice people in modern times? They sacrifice people in Kenya. In the case of Kenya, it's through roads. When you look at the level of road quote-unquote accidents, you'll realize that something is wrong. Let me give you a quick example. Recently, the people, the government or the agencies that work for the government designed a road called the Eastern Bypass that goes from Thika Road all the way to Mombasa Road. And there is a particular place called Kamakis that I want to talk about. The way they designed the road from Thika Road to Kamakis, which is like 3 or 4 kilometers long, they designed it in a way that is guaranteed to kill people. When you look at the absurd and ridiculous design that the government put together for this road, and you sit down and you think that these are engineers that are designing this, yet a common pedestrian can do a better design. So you sit and wonder, why would an engineer who's presumably trained in the designing of roads design that road at Kamakis the way they did? You may think it is a mistake. And you know, it's not one person who designs the road. It's designed by a team, and then it goes through various stages of approval. When you sit and think the number of people who approved this design, it tells you something is wrong. It can't be that they don't know what they are doing. They must know what they are doing, right? If you're to do a safety audit on that particular stretch, you'll discover it can never pass any safety audit because of the way it's designed. You can just see that this road will kill people. So at some point, you have to come to the conclusion that they must have the intention of killing people. Otherwise, why would you design that road at that point that way? Right? So they came up with this ridiculous and absurd design, full of U-turns and full of all sorts of inappropriate corners and bends in the road. You immediately understood that a lot of people will die, and a lot of people have died along Kamakis. And it has only been open for a few months. In fact, even children have died as a result of the road. So the thing that, you know, Kenyans call a road accident, and you want to blame the drivers, say we have crazy drivers, but you need to understand there's something called design. And once you design a road, there's a way you can design it in a way that it is safe. There's a way you can design it in a way that it is unsafe. You can design it to save lives or to kill lives. So the design that they adopted here and in many other places in Kenya, I'm only talking about this for whatever reason, doesn't mean that it's the only place in Kenya that is designed to kill people. But here it's a very good example of roads designed to kill, that the ultimate purpose has to be to kill people. Otherwise, why would you design it the way they designed the Eastern Bypass at Kamakis? Let me give you another example. Do you remember that in Naivasha, some time back, a couple of years ago, under the Uhuru government, there was a major quote-unquote accident at Naivasha in which over 40 people were killed in the most gruesome and horrific way. So what happened? The government put a bump at a very random spot. It's once you've gone down the escarpment, and you know cars are at a higher speed because it's a very steep escarpment, right? As you're going into the Rift Valley towards Naivasha, they put a random bump, a huge one, and then they didn't put any signage, right? And people started complaining, saying that this bump is a problem and it's not necessary. There are other measures you can take if, for example, you're trying to keep to slow down the traffic or to keep it safe, right? But that was not the intention. So people complained and they kept the bump exactly that way. And then one day there was a tanker that hit that bump, lost control, hit a bunch of cars and exploded. And it was a tanker carrying fuel. And people were burnt to death. Entire families were burnt to death in one of the most horrific accidents that we have seen. I want you to think an entire family trapped in a car burning to death. There was a man who was there, and once the accident happened, he was thrown out of the car through the window, but he left his entire family inside the car, and he witnessed them burning to death. Very traumatizing, very horrific. And then the government removed the bump. So what was the objective of the bump? The objective was to kill people. It wasn't to save lives. They needed a sacrifice. And I'm telling you, if you study the major road quote-unquote accidents in Kenya, They usually follow the election cycle. Right before an election or something that the government or the elite is trying to do, there'll be a spate of major dramatic road accidents. And then once the election is done, then there's another spate of major accidents. So before, and at that time they were pushing a constitutional change, right? And people were resisting. They wanted to create new positions in the constitution. So the idea is that they sacrifice people to these entities to win political power. And then once the election or whatever they're trying to do is done, they sacrifice more people to thank those entities. And so those entities that they worship, they feed off human trauma. Never forget that. When you're traumatized, there's an entity feeding off that energy. When you die a particularly horrific and violent death, there's an entity that feeds off that energy. Never forget that. That's how the occult works. The currency is human blood. The sacrifice is your trauma. So anytime you hear horrific, extreme accidents where the surviving people are extremely traumatized and the victims die horrific deaths, understand that was just a human sacrifice you witnessed. So roads in Kenya are altars to the occult because the elite that rules over us, this is more than just the politicians. This is all the people at the top. These people are not Christians. Never ever be deceived that these people are Christians. These people have nothing to do with the God that you think. Okay, these people worship other entities and they have to sacrifice you for power and success. And the result is you keep on supporting them, right? Yeah. So that's how it goes. It has been like that throughout history, and it is like that throughout in Kenya. So when you look at all these videos, you can see how many accidents have happened at Kamaki's at Eastern Bypass. And this is just recorded over a space of, this is the number of incidences that have happened in 2 weeks. So they designed that road knowing that it will kill people. That was the intention. So right here at Kamaki's, that is when you're driving past, understand that you're driving over an altar to the occult. That's why they will never, ever, ever build safe roads. They always design them in a way that people have to die. This is intentional, this is deliberate. And there is no way to stop it because, again, the wicked have total power. So stay safe. It never ends.